When the famous liberal student debater Olivia Parker stepped onto the stage, she thought her rigid ideology would silence every opposing voice. But Barron Trump was about to deliver the most devastating reality check of her life. Before we dive into the debate, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The university's prestigious debate forum had gathered some of the brightest young minds from across the country. Heated discussions had echoed through the hall all day, but no one could have predicted what was about to unfold in the open debate session. The spotlight focused on the stage, casting a bright glow over the massive screen in the background. The podium gleamed slightly under the lights. Olivia walked toward it with confidence, her heels clicking against the hard floor. A wave of murmurs spread through the audience, then faded into silence. "Friends," she said, her voice clear and strong, "today we're here to talk about progress. But there's a big problem. Our future is still being controlled by the older generations." In the third row, Barron Trump didn't move. Olivia continued scanning the room as if waiting for approval. "These people need to step aside," she declared, slamming her hand on the podium. "Their mindset is outdated. We are the ones who will shape the future." Applause erupted. Some students nodded eagerly, while a few in the front rows cheered. Olivia smirked confidently, straightened her posture, and swept her gaze over the audience. If we want a better world, the older generation must step down from decision-making. Dr. Harrison, the moderator, stepped forward to guide the discussion. His voice echoed through the hall. "Would anyone like to challenge this idea?" A brief silence followed. Some students exchanged glances. A few whispered among themselves. Olivia crossed her arms, a smug smile playing on her lips. Just as the conversation was about to move forward, a firm, steady voice cut through the silence. "I would—" All heads turned. Barron Trump had risen from his seat. His dark suit caught the light slightly, and his eyes locked onto Olivia's. Olivia narrowed her gaze and smirked. She drummed her fingers lightly on the podium and tilted her head challengingly. "Well, well, so you actually dared to step up." Barron walked toward the podium with slow, deliberate steps. As he reached it, the room grew even quieter. Olivia crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow. "Go ahead," she said mockingly, her voice rising slightly. A condescending smirk curled the corners of her lips. "Defend your boomer friends." Barron adjusted the microphone with ease. There was no anger in his voice, just a calm, unshakable certainty. "Thank you, Olivia," he said, his gaze steady, his tone unwavering. "But you should know, passion without wisdom is like a ship without a rudder. Powerful, yet dangerous." Olivia's smirk faltered slightly. Barron wasn't being aggressive, but with each carefully chosen word he was shifting the atmosphere in the room. "You speak of progress," he continued, his eyes scanning the audience. A few students leaned in slightly. "But progress isn't about erasing the past. It's about building on its foundation." He paused. The students held their breath. "You say people over 50 shouldn't have a voice," he said, fixing his gaze on Olivia. "Yet the technology you use, artificial intelligence, the internet, everything you rely on, was created by the very generation you want to silence." Olivia furrowed her brows, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. She opened her mouth to interrupt, but Barron lifted his hand slightly, maintaining eye contact. "Please," he said, "I listened to every word you said. Now it's your turn to listen to me." The air in the room had shifted. Even Olivia's supporters had fallen silent. Some looked down, deep in thought. Olivia crossed her arms tightly. Her gaze hardened, her brows furrowed. "You're standing here preaching morality, but you're ignoring the facts," she said, her voice rising an octave as she leaned slightly toward the podium. "Their values are holding back progress." Barron tilted his head slightly. "Oh, really? And what if those values inspired millions to fight for freedom? What if people survived because of their families and faith?" Olivia rolled her eyes and let out a frustrated sigh. "That's just an excuse. They only want to hold on to power." Barron leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the podium. "And yet, if you're standing here speaking freely right now, who do you think gave you that right?" Silence filled the room. A few students shifted in their seats, some exchanging quick glances at Olivia. Barron continued, his voice softer now as he scanned the audience. "You claim to support diversity of thought, yet you try to silence opposing views. Real progress isn't about pushing your own ideas. It's about understanding others as well." For the first time, Olivia hesitated. Students glanced at one another. Someone audibly held their breath. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. Olivia took a deep breath. "You're just giving a lecture," she said, gripping the edges of the podium tightly, her voice growing more tense. "But the truth is, their values restrict people. They dictate who we can love, how we can live our lives." Barron leaned against the podium, tilting his head slightly. "So, what you're saying is, some people shouldn't be allowed to express their views." His voice remained calm, but there was a quiet challenge beneath it. "You claim to fight for freedom, yet you silence those who think differently." A ripple of whispers spread through the audience. Some students averted their eyes, while a few cast uncertain glances at Olivia. Olivia clenched her jaw. "That's not the same thing," she snapped. Barron sighed, briefly scanning the room before speaking again. "Real progress happens when we accept differences, not erase them." His gaze swept over the audience, his words carrying weight. "If you truly believe in diversity, then that includes respecting those who think differently from you." Olivia hesitated. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The silence in the room grew heavier. Even her own supporters shifted uncomfortably. Barron stood tall at the podium. "Throughout history, the biggest mistakes were made by those who tried to silence others," he said. His tone was neither harsh nor soft. It simply carried the truth. "Real strength isn't in shutting down voices. It's in listening to them." Olivia's stare hardened, but her words caught in her throat. She narrowed her eyes. Her breathing quickened, and her shoulders tensed. "Your so-called values divide people," she said, running her fingers along the podium's surface, as if trying to gather her thoughts. "They defend an outdated mindset that stands in the way of progress." Barron shook his head slightly. "No, Olivia. You claim to fight for progress, yet you're the one trying to suppress opposing ideas. True progress comes from listening, debating, and learning, even from those you disagree with." Murmurs spread through the audience. Olivia didn't step back, but her eyes flickered toward the crowd, scanning them uncertainly. "Their values belong in the past," she declared. "We are building a new world." Barron smirked slightly. "And who laid the foundation for that world?" he asked, his voice steady. The room felt heavier now. Olivia's supporters remained silent. The tension in the air was palpable. Barron locked eyes with Olivia. "You don't have to destroy the past to build the future." Olivia took a breath, but this time she had nothing left to say. Olivia took a deep breath. "This generation is standing in the way of progress. They're restricting our freedom," she said. Her voice was shaky but assertive. She pressed her hands firmly against the podium. Barron tilted his head slightly. "Is that so?" he asked. His tone was neither soft nor aggressive, just revealing the truth. But right here, right now, who were the ones that made it possible for you to freely speak your mind at this microphone? Olivia furrowed her brows. This is a right, she said angrily. Her fingers instinctively tightened around the edge of the podium. Barron looked out at the audience. Yes, a right. But rights don't just appear on their own. The reason you can speak freely here today is because of the generations who fought for freedom of expression. The silence in the room grew heavy. Students shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at Olivia intently. Barron continued. If you're going to defend freedom, you must also acknowledge the foundations of that freedom. True freedom is not just allowing your own ideas to thrive, but also letting opposing views live. Olivia paused for a moment. She struggled to find the right words. Olivia furrowed her brow. This generation is holding us back with their old ideas, she said. Her voice was still strong, but there was a hint of unease. Our world can't be bound by their rules. Barron shook his head slightly. But this world is more than you think. His eyes fixed on Olivia. Who developed the internet you use, the artificial intelligence, the medical advancements, the generation you're trying to silence? A low murmur rose from the crowd. Some students nodded. A few whispered and looked at Olivia. Olivia hesitated for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. But their values are holding us back. Barron turned his gaze toward the audience. Really? Who were the ones who earned the freedom you have today? Who developed science, industry, democracy? Olivia's supporters fell silent for a moment. A few students looked thoughtfully ahead. Barron spoke again. True progress is not achieved by tearing down the accomplishments of the past, but by building upon them. For the first time, Olivia fell silent. Olivia was silent. But their world is over, she said, her voice now uncertain. Barron tilted his head slightly. Yes, we're in a new era, he said, his eyes locked onto Olivia's. But who built this era? Who ensured freedom, technology, and diversity of ideas? The people you want to disregard. The students in the room fell silent. Olivia opened her mouth to say something, then stopped. She looked at her supporters around her, but couldn't read their expressions. Barron took a step back into the silence. True progress happens not by silencing opposing views, but by listening to them, he said. Applause began to rise from the room. As Barron stepped away from the podium, Olivia slowly sat down. Her eyes stared blankly ahead, her face holding an uncertain, thoughtful expression. Dr. Harrison took the microphone. This debate has shown us how freedom is built, he said. As Barron moved toward the door, Olivia lifted her head and paused for a moment. But she didn't say anything. The debate was over. But some questions remained unanswered. It was about something far more important, the pride of wisdom, and the moment when understanding overcomes division. And if you enjoyed this story about standing firm in your beliefs, don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories that celebrate the values that make America great. Thank you for watching. God bless you, and God bless America.